Hello, you spicy bean. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Harriet, and today we are talking about all of the books that I read in 2024. I read 89 books, which my goal was 25. So kind of ate with that. Where are the crumbs? I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best. So we'll come out with a winner, a crowned jewel, the book of the year, and I'm very excited. But first, we have to start with all of the flops. If you guys love books and reading, then please go and check out my podcast, which literally launched today. I will link everything down below, but it's me, my boyfriend, and my bestie Rach, and we read the world's worst fan fiction, which is My Immortal by Tara Gillespie. Without further ado, let's get in to all of the books I read in 2024 ranked from worst to best. We're starting at number 83 because I've combined some series. My worst book of the year, my most hated book, grinds my fucking gears, is The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. If you guys have heard me talk about this book, you'll know why I hate it. The concept is incredible. You have an island, you have an encroaching fog, and there's 72 hours for this island to solve a murder, otherwise the fog is gonna come in and kill them all. Amazing concept, right? You'd think it would be executed well, but unfortunately, in my opinion, it was not. I found it really boring, and that concept is so good. It's like, how can this book be boring? It was boring. It was also marketed as a whodunit, but it's not that at all. Sorry, Stuart. I'm sorry. I'm sure you're a lovely person, but it was a 1, and I would have rated it a 0 if I could. Number 82, honorable mention, second most hated book. I think everybody knows what I'm about to say. It is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I'm so sorry to the Hannah Grace girlies. I get it. It's fun. It's fluffy. It was not for me. I cringed throughout the entire book, and truly I felt like this book was just smut. They got together in the first like 20% of the book. There was no conflict. There was no tension. And the Uber scene. Oh, wow. You cannot rip that from my memory. Unfortunately, it's burnt in there forever. Number 81 is Here One Moment by Leanne Moriarty. This is sad because this is a new release. It was released this year, and Leanne Moriarty is like the queen of Australian kind of crime fiction, I would say. She writes almost like Ellen Hildebrand style books. The story was really interesting. It's about this woman who gets on a plane and starts to tell everybody how and when they're going to die, which sounds amazing. But as you get through the book, you realize it's very much a slice of life, and it's really not about that. Like, it's not about the mystery of what is wrong with this woman. Why is she telling everybody? Yeah, it wasn't for me. Number 80 is Twisted Truth by Ava Strong. This is a thriller, but it's a novella, so it was very short. I really think this book would have benefited from an editor. Even just putting the plot aside, which was very generic, there were typos everywhere. On literally every page there was a typo, very confusing to read, a lot of like plot inconsistencies, things that didn't make sense, and for me, a thriller needs to make sense. Number 79 is The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. This was my book club book, and unfortunately I hated it. I really thought I was gonna love it. It's about a magical bookshop in Dublin. It just sounded like a really magical, like, fun time, but it wasn't. I was so bored. I should have DNF'd this book. Number 78 is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This is a very popular romantasy. Bottom line is this book should not have been so long. The only thing I liked about this book were the dragons, and they didn't even play really a big part at all. The concept of the dragons in this book is sick though. It's like when they die, they go up into the air, or they die in the air, and then they solidify as moons, hence the title of the book. And I really thought that that would play a bigger role, but it just didn't. Number 77 is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. I don't think that these styles of romance books are for me. I love a romance book with emotional depth. That's like really fundamentally what I love in a romance, and this had no depth. They were obsessed with each other pretty much from the beginning. It's marketed as an enemies to lovers. It's like, I think it's her brother's best friend, and it's a country, like a cowboy romance as well, and they hated each other for 5 seconds and then they were obsessed with each other. Very lust-based, a lot of smut. So if you like that, you'll really enjoy this book. That's not what I look for in a romance. Number 76, another 1 star. I gave a lot of 1 stars this year, as you can tell, is Escape to the French Farmhouse by Jo Thomas. Random pick, but I was actually in Provence in France. I was in this home and they had like a bookshelf, and I was picking up my next read, saw it. It's set where I was, so I was like, I have to read this. And it's a book for middle-aged British women. Nothing wrong with that. Slay if you're a middle-aged British woman. I am not, so I really didn't connect with the story. Number 75 is Get in My Swamp by G.M. Ferry. This is a Shrek smut, like a Shrek erotica, and I actually made a whole video about this. I will link it up here for you. I'm not discouraging you from reading it. If you want to have a good time with some of your girlfriends, get a bottle of wine and read that book. Like, it's so funny. It's literally based off Shrek and Fiona. Their names are Beck and Leona. I loved every second of it, but it was a 1-star. Number 74 is Mountains Made of Glass by Scarlett St. Clair. This was a random one. I just picked this up when I was at a shop, didn't read the back, just thought it was like a fantasy book. It is a novella, but it was like basically erotica. So if you like that, you'll probably like this. I just wasn't expecting to pick up like a fully smut driven book. Number 73 is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This is a love or hate book, I think. It's very slice of life. Basically, it's about this girl in the 2000s, and she decides that she hates her life, so she wants to like sleep through the entire year by taking like narcotics, I think. And honestly, I just found this book to be so incredibly boring. I thought the writing was good. Like, she's obviously an incredible author, and I loved the concept. It fell super flat for me. I found it so boring. And then the ending, if you've read it, you'll know, but that just felt thrown in there very quickly, really random. Number 72 is my only 1.5-star read of the year. All of those ones that I've just told you were 1 star, and this is my 1.5, and it's Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This is a small town billionaire romance. Those are like the tropes that the girlies say. Basically, you have Dahlia, who moves home after her engagement breaks up, and home is Lake Wisteria, a small town. Just so happens that there's like a bunch of billionaires living there, which I don't know, and she's a famous TV personality. I'm like, these people would not all live in Lake Wisteria, but pop off queen. Anyway, putting that aside, they have this like rivalry, they're childhood friends, and then they obviously fall in love throughout the book. This book is, I believe, 550 something pages, which no romance book needs to be that long. So that was its first setback for me. And then secondly, I just didn't really believe their relationship at all. And it was very lusty. I just didn't think that they actually liked each other. I don't know. Number 71 is The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. This is her newest release, and actually the first Frida McFadden book I've ever read. I thought it was okay, but I've read so many good thriller novels, like thrillers before this year were my favorite genre. Now it's fantasy, but like, I have always been a crime thriller girly. I love them, and I think people like Frida McFadden, if you haven't read that much like thriller content, it's so easy to binge, like really easy to read, fun, crazy plot twists, and so I totally understand why people like it. I just think I have so much to compare it to that it didn't do anything for me. Number 70 is another thriller, another very viral one, and it's Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is the second Riley Sager book I read this year, and again, just fell super flat for me. I think I'm probably quite a harsh judge when it comes to thrillers. This was a great concept. It's about this creepy old building in New York called the Bartholomew, and really weird things start happening. People start going missing, and you kind of uncover what it's all about. And I think the thing that I didn't like about this book is the book really could go one of two ways, and one way is crazy and one way makes sense, and he went the crazy route. Number 69 is The Girls of Summer by Katie Bishop. My friend Jem and I went to Europe, and she grabbed this at the airport so that we could both have like a read together, which was so cute and fun. This book just was so average. I believe it's set back in like the 70s, 80s, and it's about a group of girls who work at a hostel, and then somebody dies, so it's kind of like a mystery thriller, kind of slice of life. It was fine. It just was very forgettable, and I didn't love it. Number 68 is 1,000 Boy Kisses. I read it in a reading vlog. I'll try and link all of the reading vlogs that I've read these books in down below, but this book I think I would have loved when I was 16, maybe even 14. It just, as a late 20s girl, it just was very young for me, and also I've read that exact story before. Number 67 is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This is another like 600-page romance book, and I just don't think any romance book needs to be that long. If it is that long, it's probably gonna get a low rating from me. I thought this was fine. It wasn't bad at all. I just didn't really like the guy. I think he was not only grumpy, but like actually an asshole. This is another small town romance, grumpy sunshine vibes, and it just wasn't for me. Number 66 is The Summer I Turned Pretty. I really wanted to read this because I loved the show, and for probably one of the first times in my life, I liked the show better. It was so much better to see it all and feel I just felt the emotion more. The book was really not great, in my opinion, but I'm glad that the book exists because the show I really loved. Number 65 is The Murder Rule by Dervla McTiernan. I love Dervla McTiernan. She is one of my favorite thriller/crime authors. If you haven't read her, highly recommend the Cormac Riley series. So I was really excited for this, but instead of setting it in Ireland, where she normally sets it because that's where she's from, she set this book in the US, and I think it was just doomed from the beginning. I don't know. I felt like she didn't totally understand like the US justice system. It's about this law student who like wants to infiltrate so that she can manipulate the case, and I just didn't believe it, didn't like it. I don't know, just didn't feel like a Dervla book. Number 64 is my final 2-star, and it is A Court of Frost and Starlight. I'm sorry, I know some people love this book. I am not one of the people who needed a break from the heaviness of the ACOTAR series. I think it was building and building and building, and then there's a random Christmas novella. Number 63 is a 2.5 star, so we're moving up, and this is Pheasant's Nest by Louise Milligan. I saw her talk at like this writers event that I went to, was fascinated by her. She's an investigative journalist and has spent a lot of time covering like homicide cases, so she put a lot of her experience into this book. It's about an investigative journalist that gets kidnapped, and it's a crazy story. I just didn't like it very much. I don't know, I think the plot didn't do it for me. The writing didn't do it for me. Number 62 is The Christmas Tree Farm by Laurie Gilmore. This is a fluffy Christmas romance. It was never gonna get above a 2.5 for me. I thought it was very smutty, but I don't know, it was fun and festive to read something like this. Number 61 is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I believe this was released last year, maybe this year, I don't know. It was released kind of recently, and I loved The Silent Patient. I know that's controversial, a lot of people don't like it. I loved it. That was one of the first true 5-star thrillers I ever read. I read it the year it came out, but this book was not very good. He definitely used a similar formula, and it showed. Moving on to my 3 stars, at number 60 we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I thought this book was better than average. It wasn't great, but I did like it, and it helped pull me out of a reading slump. The thing about this book is like you've heard it all before. There's not a single original thought in this book, but sometimes that's okay. Like I watched the same 20 rom-coms over and over and over again. There's no shame in that. Number 59 is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This was my first Riley Sager book, and I liked it better than the other one. It was about a creepy old lady, and a young girl goes to stay with her, and the old lady, everybody in her family was murdered except for her, and so you kind of find out what happened. I thought it was fine. I obviously enjoyed it more than I didn't because it's a 3-star. Number 58 was Holly Madison's memoir called Down the Rabbit Hole. If you guys don't know, she was a Playboy bunny. She was on the reality show that's like Girls Next Door or something back in the 2000s, which I watched when I was really young. Loved it. It's like life at the Playboy Mansion, and in this memoir she tells the real story of what happened. Obviously we know a lot came out about Hugh Hefner and how vile he was, so this was her side of the story. I found it really fascinating to hear her story, but I will say I think to write a good memoir you have to have a certain amount of self-awareness, and I just don't think she had it. At number 57 we have Whisper by Lynette Noni. You kind of don't know what's gonna happen until right at the end. She basically gets sent to this like asylum, and she doesn't understand why they're doing experiments on her. She really feels like what the fuck is going on, and I think she doesn't speak, and then you know towards the end of the book she speaks, and you kind of figure out why she hasn't spoken and like what's happening, and then that's also the point when you realize what the book is actually about. So I can't say much, but I thought this was cool. Definitely YA, and you can tell, but it's like a fun, easy read. At number 56 we have The Golden Couple by Greer Hendricks, and I think there's another author, but I haven't written it down. This was actually my first book of 2024, and it's like a mystery thriller about this couple that you think is perfect and then they're not. I can't remember much else about it. It was pretty forgettable, but I did enjoy it. Number 55 is Indigo Ridge. I actually really enjoyed this book. It is a mystery thriller and a romance, and I wasn't sure how that was gonna work. It's kind of like a 2-in-1 shampoo. Like, neither of them are gonna be done perfectly, but together it was just like a fun time. Like, it got the job done, if that makes sense. Number 54 is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I thought this was a really cute, fun, silly little romance. It didn't have a heap of depth, but I really enjoyed the concept. Basically, these two people got married in college because the guy wouldn't get his trust fund without being married, and I think she thought that they ended up getting divorced, but then actually they're still married, and he comes back to her a couple years later and says, hey, my family thinks we're married. I need you to come to a wedding that I'm going to and convince everybody that we're married. So fake dating. It's on like an island. It's really fun. I really liked it. I would recommend. Number 53 is 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. This is the sequel. Well, it's kind of like book 1.5 in between Serpent and the Wings of Night and book 2 in that series. It's a novella. You can read it on its own, but I think it reads better if you like read them all because you'll understand the world better. I really enjoyed this novella actually. It was super fun. It's hard to read like a novella that I love, but I really, really did enjoy this one. Number 52 is Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. I read this very recently and it's a Christmas book. I thought it was really cute, really fun. It had more emotional depth than I was anticipating because normally Christmas books are just like fluffy, smutty, but this one was good. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend that you pick it up for next Christmas if you celebrate Christmas and you want a Christmas book. Number 51 is A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. I really enjoyed this book, but it fell a little bit flat for me because The 7-Year Slip and The Dead Romantics, I really liked both of them. This book is about a girl who basically gets transported into her favorite book series. She gets transported into this fictional town, which is crazy. Yeah, you're kind of like going through this almost mystery of this guy. She's like, how do I know you? Who are you? I recognize you. I recognize your name. Everybody's fictional. So she's like, is this whole life going to disappear when I leave the town? Really cool concept. Number 50 was Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. This is my first Dolly book. I know everybody loves her and I really enjoyed it. I randomly got this again on my Europe trip. A bunch of like places I stayed had these libraries and I just would swap books, which was really amazing. It's kind of like a tale of a girl in her 30s trying to find love. I just thought it was very realistic and really fun to read. Number 49 is The Cruel Prince. So happy I finally read this book. I really enjoyed this actually. It's set in this like fae world. I can't remember too much about it, but there's obviously a cruel prince who literally is like, when we're talking enemies to lovers, these guys are enemies. Like, this prince literally hates this girl to the point where his friends are beating her up and stuff. And that's something I did not love about this book. I'm like, you are condoning violence towards this chick. Ick. Like, red flag. Number 48 is A Court of Wings and Ruin. I found this book really difficult to get through. I started it right off the back of the second book in the Akatar series. This is the third book, and I just found it so difficult to get through. Sorry. It's very political, very war driven, and I don't mind a political book, but I think the first 2 books were so like fun and fruity, and then this book felt very intense. But the last 50% of this book is insane, like so good. So definitely worth pushing through. I don't love when I have to push through. I wish a book was just good the whole way through. Number 47 is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I'm surprised by this because I read Window Shopping by her, which is a Christmas book, and I hated that book. But It Happened One Summer was so cute. It's like a small town romance, so fluffy, but it's not pretending to be anything other than that. So I really enjoyed it. Number 46 is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Bride was very fun. It's like not quite a fantasy. It's a paranormal romance between a vampire and a werewolf, and they're obviously enemies, but they have to make this political alliance through getting married to each other. It was really fun. The only thing about this book is there were only a couple of smut scenes, but you will never forget that smut, because werewolves do this thing. I can't remember what it's called now. If you know about it, you'll know what I'm talking about, but oh my god, it was traumatic to read. Number 45 is Iron Flame. This is the sequel to Fourth Wing, and I just felt like this book was really rushed. I loved the first book so much. This book just, yeah, it felt like her editor or whoever, publisher, whatever, was like, we need to get a book out right now, like let's ride off the success of Fourth Wing, and it just felt really rushed. Number 44 is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This was such a weird but fun read. Highly recommend you give it a go. It's iconic for a reason. It was just like so bizarre in the best way. Number 43 is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I read this in a reading vlog and I enjoyed this book, but it felt like World War II fan fiction. If you haven't read much literary fiction or historical fiction, this book would be really great for you. I just have read a lot of other books that are kind of similar, and this one just didn't hit the mark for me. Number 42 is Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home. I really liked this book. It just didn't hit like quite the same as the first two books for some reason, even though we're getting more emotionally deep. I'm just sick of this like toxic relationship. I wish they would just communicate. We're moving on to the 4 stars and above. So any book from this point onwards, I loved and I would highly recommend. At number 41, we actually have 3 books. So this is where I've combined, but we have Heartstopper Volume 1 through 3. I loved all of these books, comics, whatever you want to call them. It's about a high school relationship. One of them is not sure about his sexuality. He actually really didn't realize until he met this other boy, and it's very cute. It's very sweet. At number 40, we have A Court This Cruel and Lovely. I really liked this book. It was like not quite as good as I was anticipating, but then the ending was insane. So I have to continue the series. Number 39 is The Thursday Murder Club. This is such a sweet book. It's about a group of elderly people who get together on Thursdays and solve murders, but the craziest thing is one day a murder takes place in their retirement village and they get actually intertwined in a murder. The characters in this book feel so real, and if there's one thing that's gonna do it for me every time, it's a book about elderly people. Number 38 is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I loved this book. I thought it was so cutesy, very fun. You very much have to put reality aside. There's a lot in this book that doesn't make sense, and I will say the whole ending I really didn't enjoy, but I loved it. So many banger quotes in this book. I underlined so much about death, life. Basically the main character is a ghostwriter for a famous author, and yeah, she meets up with this editor, and then the next week she flies home and then he shows up on her door and he's a ghost, and she's like, how did you die? Like, what's happening? Number 37 is Magnolia Parks, which is book number 1 in the Magnolia Parks series that I told you guys about. Just so fun. It just feels like you're gossiping with a friend. Number 36 is Emma by Jane Austen. This is a classic for a reason. It's a beautiful story, very fun. Clueless, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, is based off this book, and I was just so happy to finally read it. Number 35 is Bunny by Mona Awad. This book is so bizarre. Like, it's so fucked up, I can't even explain. It's pitched as a fairy tale horror, which is exactly true. If you're scared, like me, I'm a scaredy cat, it's not scary, it's just really weird and kind of like graphic, but not in a scary way. It's about this like almost cult at this university. Just go into it blind. It's crazy, but it's good. Number 34 is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I co-read this, or buddy read this, with my best friend Jem in Europe. Super cute, super fun, nothing groundbreaking, nothing special, but like, I like a romance with emotional depth, and this had that for me. Number 33 is The Serpent and the Wings of the Night by Carissa Broadbent. I told you guys before about Six Scorched Roses, which is the novella. This is book number 1, and I would pitch this as Hunger Games, but with vampires, and I just really loved reading about a vampire fantasy world, because I think at the moment Fae are kind of having their moment, and it was really nice to get away from the Fae fantasy and explore something different. And I loved the games element of this, the trials. Number 32, we have Daisy Hates, which is book number 2 in the Magnolia Park series that I was just talking about. I love Daisy's story. I love Julian. I love Christian. I much prefer this side of the story to Magnolia Parks. If you guys don't know, Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates are 2 people in this universe, and the books are told from their perspectives, but the timelines are the same. Number 31 is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This is a Japanese novel that's been translated. It's beautiful, it's very short, and it's very much like, it feels like short stories and they all kind of have a lesson. Basically, there's a coffee shop. In this coffee shop, you can sit at this one table and go back in time. You have to travel back to the current day before the coffee gets cold. And it's just a beautiful book. I feel like you can take a lot of wisdom from this book. Number 30 is Before You Knew My Name by Jacqueline Bublitz. This is a debut novel from an Australian author, and I thought it was beautiful. It is about a young girl who gets murdered, but you actually are told the story from her perspective after she's died. It's such a beautiful story because it's not a thriller in the traditional sense. It basically explores the fact that like when people are murdered, we focus so much on the murderer, why they did it, what they were doing that day, and we don't focus on the victim. And so this book is very much focused on the victim. Even when you find out who did it, it's not about him. Number 29 is What Happened to Nina by Dervla McTiernan. This is, I believe, also set in the US, same as her other book, but this one was done a lot better. It's based on the Gabby Petito case, I believe. So yeah, you have this couple and she goes missing and it explores what happened to her. But the main reason I love this book is, again, kind of like the one I just told you guys about, it focuses on the media's responsibility and role in these cases. At number 28, we have Red Rising. I loved this book. It's set in space and you have this class system based on color, and at the very bottom are the reds, and that's our main character. Darrow is a red and he lives down in the mines, and they have this really grueling hard work life basically, and at the top are the golds, and something happens and sets the plan into motion that Darrow really discovers this class system. They don't really know about it, and he ends up getting intertwined with the golds, and it is so good. Number 27 is A Court of Mist and Fury. This is the second book in the ACOTAR series. I originally rated this a 5-star, but I've since taken my rating down. But I really loved this. Obviously, we get a really fun romance, and it's just a fun book. At number 26, we have The Crimson Moth or Heartless Hunter. The title changes based on where you are. I loved this. This is honestly an honorable mention. This was one of my favorite books of the year. I just thought it was so fun. It's about a witch and a witch hunter. Enemies, obviously. It's just such a fascinating world to be in. His sole purpose is tracking down witches, and her sole purpose is trying to pretend that she's not a witch. Number 25 is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. It's a gothic, very dark romantasy book. Such a cool magic system. It's based on providence cards, which are kind of like tarot cards or playing cards, and when you're holding the card you can wield that power, but otherwise you don't have it. But also there are a lot of cons to like using that power too much, and our main character is called Elspeth, and she actually is infected with this illness that's taking over this world. So cool, like such a cool book. Number 24 is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I thought this was so fun. It's about a female bodyguard who gets assigned to this famous male actor. She doesn't want to work for him and he doesn't want her to work for him. Like, he's like, I don't need a bodyguard. She's such a badass. It reminds me of Miss Congeniality with Sandra Bullock. She is giving that main character energy where she's like this tough woman, but she's like also cute and fun. I don't know. I loved this book. I thought the romance was great. I thought the banter was exceptional. I was laughing out loud. Number 22, we have Throne of Glass. Finally started Throne of Glass and I love it. I love this series. I get the hype. Currently, at the time of filming this, I'm on the tandem read right now, but this book, Throne of Glass, was a 4-star. I thought it was so much fun and I did not know what was coming. And then at number 21, we have the next book in the series, which is Crown of Midnight. Every book just gets better. Like, it really does. At number 20, we have Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig, which is the sequel to One Dark Window. This is a standout sequel. Like, this is a duology, and this is how you do a sequel, okay? The second book, better than the first. You focus on a different couple, but the first couple is still involved in this book, and the way that everything connects at the end, Number 19, we're going back to Throne of Glass. I have The Assassin's Blade. I actually rated this higher than Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. Those were 4 stars, and this is a 4.5. For whatever reason, I loved this book. This is the prequel, and I actually read it first, and I just thought it was so good. It's set into a bunch of like little novellas, so a bunch of kind of short stories almost, and I just loved it. I thought it was such a good way to set up the world. I understood the character. You go on this journey with her, and the ending. Number 18 and number 17 are Harry Potter books. Basically, I am constantly listening to the Stephen Fry audiobook series. Ethan and I listen every night before bed. So I usually finish like 2 to 3 of these books a year, and they're always 5 stars because I just love Harry Potter. So we read The Goblet of Fire and The Order of the Phoenix. Number 16 is the first book in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. A lot of people don't like this book, and I get it, but I loved this book. This was my first true fantasy this year, or really since I was a kid. I had read Fourth Wing and then immediately went on to ACOTAR, and you can tell like the jump between Fourth Wing and ACOTAR is crazy. ACOTAR is a lot, in my opinion, a lot better written, more thought out, all of that. And I was just mind blown. I loved this world. I loved learning about the Fae. Up until this point, I thought that fairies were like Tinkerbell. At number 15, we're getting close. We're in the top 15 now, which is crazy. But at number 15, we have I'm Glad My Mum Died. This memoir is so good. I loved Jeanette McCurdy growing up. I loved iCarly. I loved her music. Like, I was a Jeanette stan. And to hear about what happened to her, to hear about what happened to her as a kid is so crazy. And like, I just love learning about child stars. I hate what, you know, the industry and these people who exploit them do to them, but I love hearing about it. I think it's so brave that they're speaking up, and I don't know, this book was just so good. It was 5-star, and I recommend listening to the audiobook over reading it because she narrates it. Number 14 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I thought the writing was beautiful, the concept was beautiful. If you guys don't know, a girl, Addie LaRue, makes a deal with the devil, I think, and basically she can live forever, but the catch is that everybody will forget about her instantly. So she'll be in a coffee shop ordering a coffee, and then the second that she leaves, they'll never have known her. It's really interesting to see the way that she moves through the centuries, the decades. Number 13 is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I loved this book so much. Beautiful, deep romance about an apartment that moves back and forward 7 years in time, and this couple time traveling, effectively meeting each other in the past and in the present. It also explores grief very beautifully because she's lost her aunt, and that relationship was very special to her. Book number 12 is an honorable mention because I've read this book last year. This was a reread, but it's Book Lovers by Emily Henry, my favorite book probably of all time. I don't know what she put in this book or why I love it so much, because I know a lot of people like don't like this book. It's their least favorite Emily Henry, which for me is a crime, but I get it. We all have different opinions, but I just, oh my God, I love this book so much. The romance, perfection. The banter, perfection. The setting, the small town, perfection. Nora, the fact that the main female character is this like hard, shark, workaholic, like the other woman in the movies that you hate, like the Meredith Blake. I love her. Oh my God. Just when people who are guarded and have been misused and don't have trust, when they crack and fall in love, it just, I love it. Number 11 is The Tattooist of Auschwitz. I read this book in, did I read this in a reading vlog? I don't know. I've talked about this quite a bit on my channel, but this book is really, really amazing. Lael's experience is obviously heartbreaking and tragic, but there's also a lot of hope and love in this story as well. We are officially onto the top 10, my 10 favorite books of 2024. I love all of these books so much. So at number 10, we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Say what you want about this book, okay? But I fucking love this book. It was so entertaining. Being in a war college with dragons, sorry, that's perfection. Like, it just, something about the setting did it for me. And it's gonna keep doing it for me. I loved it. If you haven't read a lot of fantasy, it's a great one to start with. It's what I started with because it's just so easy and entertaining and Moorish. I literally could not put this book down. Number 9 is A Court of Silver Flames. I did not like this book when I was starting out. I could not get through it. It put me in the biggest slump. I think I stopped about 30% of the way through and left it for like 6 months. This is told from Nesta's perspective, who is Feyre's older sister. Feyre is our main character in the first few books. I fucking hated Nesta. I hated her. She was useless. She was mean. She was basically a bully to her little sister who has gone above and beyond to, you know, provide for their family. But nobody is bad inherently. I don't think. Everybody's complicated, and I think it's like hurt people, right? And this story was just, I'm literally tearing up. Like I think you either will connect with it or you won't. But again, kind of like I said about Nora in Book Lovers, to see somebody who is so hard and guarded just break down their walls and learn how to love and learn how to forgive themselves and forgive other people. Like, number 8 is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is how you do a romance book. This book was so good. I was obsessed from the start. You start off with this guy Justin posting to Reddit, which I just thought was so iconic. He posts on r/am I the asshole and basically talks about how he thinks he's cursed, how he's the guy that you date before you meet the guy that you're gonna marry. And then this girl Emma ends up DMing him being like, literally same. So they agree to date each other to cancel out the curse, and then they'll meet their person. At number 7 we have Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. This book is just, again, about this person who is deeply misunderstood, and you see her break her walls down. Eleanor lives her life by a schedule. Okay, she's the most controlled person you'll ever meet. She doesn't really have fun. She doesn't go crazy. She's really socially awkward, loves just like the safety of routine. And obviously nobody is born that way, and so you kind of learn about her life, and she builds these beautiful friendships and relationships with these people who pull her out of her shell, and it is so good. At number 6 we have Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I thought this was like a great romance book. It felt very like old-timey love story to me. I've actually had some people read it based on my recommendation and didn't love it, so maybe it's just a me thing, but I loved the way this romance played out. Basically, you have two rivals and they both work at a newspaper fighting for the same position, and then on the side back at home you have our main character Iris, and she's typing these letters on her little typewriter and hiding them in her closet, and then one day the letters are gone. And who are the letters going to? They are being magically transported to her rival. We're now on to the top 5. At number 5 we have Heir of Fire, which is the third book in the Throne of Glass series. I can't say much about it because obviously it's the middle of a series, but what I will say is this book is where the story really starts, I think. You really understand the world that you're going to be living in, because the first couple books, you know, you're being drip fed information, but this one you're really thrown into it. We get a bunch of new characters who I am obsessed with. You know who I'm talking about. She is literally so slay. I'm obsessed with her. Just such a good story. I was gripped from start to finish. It's quite a long book, and I think I read it in like a couple of days. Number 4 is Beartown by Frederick Buckman. This is such an impactful read. Basically, you're living in a small town in Sweden called Beartown, and this town is based around ice hockey. This ice hockey team has the chance to kind of like make it big and put the town on the map. It's a junior ice hockey team, by the way. And something bad happens. Something really, really bad happens, and it's very traumatic, and it divides the town into the people who are fighting for what's right and into the people who are trying to push this incident under the rug. The book really is about that incident and what the aftermath of it, but you kind of don't know what the incident is until it happens. I will say, if you have specific triggers that you cannot read about, look up the trigger warnings, but if you're comfortable to just read whatever, then I wouldn't, because for me, the impact was coming from not knowing what was going to happen, like what the incident was. Number 3 is Funny Story by Emily Henry. We have Daphne, who is this very organized, structured, I think she's a librarian. And then this guy Miles smokes weed, wears Crocs, has tattoos, polar opposites. Daphne is engaged to Peter. Peter ends up falling in love with his childhood best friend Petra. Who is Petra dating? Miles. So basically, Peter and Petra run off together, and Daphne is left high and dry, so she ends up moving in with Petra's ex-boyfriend, Miles. That's how they meet, and they decide to fake date to make their exes jealous, and they form this stunning friendship. Oh, the depth in this book, the banter in this book, I have so many quotes. I love this book. Number 2 is crazy that this has made it so high in this list, but I read the Mindfuck series this year, and I read this honestly, ironically. I heard someone talk about it and I was like, okay, I've never read dark romance before. I think I'm gonna hate it. It's gonna be smutty, just like not gonna be my thing. Tell me why I read all 5 of these books. They're kind of like novellas, they're very short. I read all 5 of them in 2 days. This series, oh my god, I'm obsessed. Like, this probably is realistically the series and the books that I think about the most from this year. You have this girl, Lana Queen, and she is in fact a serial killer. Let me just say, while killing is never right, I do not condone murder. She isn't just like a serial killer for no reason. She has very specific targets for very specific reasons. And then we have a police officer, and it is a romance between them, but also you really go through it with Lana. You find out why she's doing this. You plan her murders with her. It's very graphic, it's pretty violent, and there is smut, but for whatever reason, I ate this shit up. Gobble gobble, like I loved it. And finally, my book of the year, which is gonna be annoying for some people because it is part of a series, but it is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas, which is the 4th book, I believe, in the Throne of Glass series. This book is perfection. This series is so good and it just keeps getting better, and I just am obsessed. Selena, I would die for these characters. Like, I actually feel like they're my best friends, and I will stand by them. I will stand by them no matter what they do. I am obsessed, and this book specifically just really did it for me. I cannot recommend Throne of Glass enough. I just think it's perfect. It's actually like the perfect fantasy series, and what I like about it so much more than ACOTAR is ACOTAR feels very romantic-y. Throne of Glass feels very fantasy. Only really now are we getting into the romance, but it's really not about that. It's very political and based on the world rather than like based on the romance. Anyway, those are all of the books that I've read. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and hopefully got some good recommendations out of it. I love making these videos and I love hearing about your books as well. Leave your favorite book of 2024 down below, and maybe we can all get some recommendations. Maybe write the name of the book and then give us like a 1-sentence reason why we should read it. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to check out the podcast. I will link it all down below for you, and I'll see you guys next week with a new video. Bye!